The sinking of the RMS Titanic in April 1912 remains one of the most infamous maritime disasters in history. More than a century later, the tragedy continues to captivate the public imagination, surrounded by tales of ill-fated destiny and engineering oversights. This article explores the real reasons behind the sinking of the Titanic, dissecting the engineering errors and unraveling the legends that have become part of its enduring legacy. The sinking of the Titanic, often attributed to a combination of unfortunate circumstances, was significantly influenced by various engineering flaws and design limitations inherent in its construction. Despite being heralded as the pinnacle of naval engineering of its time, the Titanic's design contained critical shortcomings that contributed to the scale of the disaster. A fundamental issue was the design of the ship's hull and its watertight compartments. The Titanic was equipped with 16 watertight compartments, designed to close using automatic watertight doors. However, these compartments did not extend high enough above the waterline. In the event of a breach, water could overflow from one compartment into another, as happened after the collision with the iceberg. This design flaw, initially intended to make the ship unsinkable, ironically contributed to its rapid sinking after the hull was compromised. The materials used in the Titanic's construction were also under scrutiny. Metallurgical analysis of the wreck's steel and rivets suggested that the materials might have been of substandard quality. The steel used in the hull's construction contained a high level of sulfur, making it more brittle and susceptible to fracturing in the cold North Atlantic waters. Additionally, the iron rivets, particularly in the bow and stern, were found to be weaker and more prone to shearing than was ideal. These material flaws meant that when the Titanic struck the iceberg, the impact likely caused more extensive damage than would have occurred with higher quality materials. Another significant design limitation was the insufficient number of lifeboats. The Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for just over half of the passengers and crew on board. This shortfall was due to a combination of outdated maritime safety regulations and aesthetic considerations by the ship's designers. The Board of Trade's regulations at the time required ships over 10,000 tons to carry 16 lifeboats, a requirement the Titanic exceeded, but not sufficiently for its actual capacity. The decision not to equip additional lifeboats was partly influenced by the desire to keep the decks uncluttered and maintain the ship's luxurious appearance. In essence, the Titanic's engineering flaws and design limitations were a product of the technological and regulatory context of its time. These factors, combined with the tragic events of its maiden voyage, led to one of the most catastrophic maritime disasters in history. The lessons learned from the Titanic's sinking profoundly influenced shipbuilding practices and maritime safety regulations, ushering in a new era of naval engineering and safety consciousness. The tragedy of the Titanic was compounded by a series of human errors and misjudgments, both before and during its ill-fated maiden voyage. These errors, reflecting overconfidence in technology and underestimation of nature's unpredictability, played a crucial role in the unfolding disaster. The ship's high speed in dangerous waters was a critical error. Despite receiving multiple iceberg warnings from other ships, Captain Edward J. Smith chose to maintain the Titanic's high speed of 22 knots. This decision was influenced by the common practice of the time and the immense pressure to demonstrate the ship's capabilities and adhere to the scheduled arrival time in New York. The belief in the ship's unsinkability likely contributed to this overconfidence. The response to the iceberg collision further demonstrated fatal misjudgments. After striking the iceberg, there was a delay in understanding the severity of the damage. The decision to continue sailing for a short period after the collision worsened the flooding. Once the gravity of the situation was acknowledged, the evacuation was poorly managed. The lifeboats were not filled to capacity, and many were launched partially empty. This mismanagement was partly due to a lack of adequate training and drills for the crew and passengers on how to properly evacuate the ship. Moreover, the ship's distress signals were not promptly heeded. The nearest ship, the Californian, was close enough to come to the Titanic's aid. However, due to a series of miscommunications and failures to properly interpret distress signals, help from the Californian was delayed. The wireless operators on the Californian had already turned off their equipment for the night and did not hear the Titanic's distress calls until it was too late. In summary, the sinking of the Titanic was not solely a consequence of its collision with an iceberg, but was significantly exacerbated by human error and misjudgment. The decisions to maintain high speed despite iceberg warnings, the inadequate response to the emergency, and the mismanagement of the evacuation were all pivotal in the high loss of life. This chain of human errors underscored the fallibility of relying solely on technology and highlighted the need for better safety practices, communication, and emergency preparedness in maritime operations. The sinking of the Titanic, beyond its stark reality, has been enveloped in myths and legends over the years, some born from folklore and others from misinterpretations or exaggerations of the facts. These tales have added a layer of mystique and intrigue to the already tragic story of the Titanic. A persistent myth is the notion that the Titanic was widely advertised as unsinkable. While the ship was celebrated for its advanced safety features and was indeed described as being practically unsinkable, it was never officially declared to be unsinkable. This myth likely emerged in the aftermath of the disaster, as people grappled with the shock of such an advanced ship sinking on its maiden voyage. Another popular legend involves a cursed mummy purportedly being transported in the Titanic's cargo hold, which some believe to be the cause of the ship's misfortune. The story, however, is entirely fictional. The British Museum confirmed that no Egyptian artifacts, let alone a cursed mummy, were on board the Titanic. The tale seems to be a fabrication combining the public's fascination with both the Titanic and the contemporaneous interest in Egyptology. The Titanic story is also intertwined with tales of premonitions and forewarnings. Various stories and works of fiction, written before the Titanic's maiden voyage, eerily resemble the disaster. The most notable is Morgan Robertson's novella Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan, published in 1898. Which features a ship striking an iceberg and sinking in the North Atlantic. While these works are coincidental, they have fueled speculation and a sense of mystique about the Titanic's fate. Additionally, there are legends about the band playing Nearer, My God, to Thee as the ship sank. While survivors' accounts confirm that the band continued to play as the ship went down, there is no definitive evidence about the last song they performed. The choice of Nearer, My God, to Thee, however, has become symbolic, reflecting the poignant and solemn nature of the tragedy. In conclusion, the myths and legends surrounding the Titanic add a layer of cultural lore to the historical event. While these tales range from exaggerations to outright fabrications, they have contributed to the enduring fascination with the Titanic's story, blending fact and fiction into the collective memory of one of the most famous maritime disasters in history.